Air in the great hall was thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth carried in on too many cloaks, mingling with the sharper tang of roasted meat and the unspoken tension that always simmered beneath the surface of the Serpent's Ridgepack. Outside, the night pressed in, a velvet curtain draped over ancient trees, but here, under the flickering oil lamps, every shadow seemed to hold a whispered judgment. Iria Wexford knew that judgment intimately. It clung to her like the cold mist that often rolled in from the marshlands, a constant companion that marked her as an omega, wolfless, barren, and irrevocably broken in the eyes of her kin. Tonight, as the harvest feast swelled around her, a dull ache throbbed behind her ribs, a familiar prelude to the inevitable slight, the cutting remark, the icy dismissal that reminded her of her place, or lack thereof. Her gaze, trained to seek out exits and avoid confrontation, dropped to the worn planks beneath her boots, already bracing for the next invisible blow. The weight of the moon, full and indifferent beyond the high windows, felt like a personal accusation, highlighting her insignificance. The cacophony of the harvest feast was a familiar torment, a symphony of joy and camaraderie that Iria could never truly join. She stood on the periphery, a ghost among the living, her worn tunic blending into the shadows of the hall's furthest wall. She was just another mouth to feed, another body to ignore, and her existence was a constant, low hum of shame. Her wolf, if it had ever truly existed, was silent, a hollow echo in her soul, leaving her feeling incomplete, a half-being in a world of potent shifters. Tonight, the insult came from Rorik, a burly beta with a laugh as loud as his temper. He'd tripped, admittedly, but his eyes, when they landed on Iria, were sharp with blame. "Watch where you're standing, Omega. You're practically invisible, a hazard to those of us who actually contribute." The words were a dull knife, twisting in an old wound. They weren't illegal, not truly, and she knew the script. A flicker of unease passed through the handful of shifters nearby, but no one spoke. No one ever did. This was her lot. Her chin dipped, a practiced motion of acquiescence, her hands clenching at her sides. She felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks, the stinging burn behind her eyes, already preparing to swallow the humiliation whole, to fade back into the background noise, as she always had. But she didn't get the chance. A voice, low and resonant, cut through the din of the hall like a sharpened blade. It wasn't loud, didn't boom, but it carried an undeniable authority that silenced conversations mid-sentence, froze laughter on lips, and drew every single eye in the vast hall, including Iria's own, to its source. "You don't speak to her like that." Alpha King Dorian Falk. Iria's breath hitched. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief, then immediate terror. Dorian Falk was a legend, a force of nature, a king whose presence was a silent, crushing weight. He stood across the hall, a figure carved from shadow and might, his dark hair falling over a brow that was perpetually furrowed in thought or command. Scars, faint silver lines, crisscrossed one side of his jaw, testament to battles fought and won, adding to the raw, untamed power that pulsed around him. His eyes, the color of ancient forest moss, were fixed not on Rorik, but on Iria for a fleeting, disorienting moment that made her stomach clench. Then they swung to Rorik, and the air crackled. Dorian hadn't raised his voice, hadn't shown an ounce of heat or anger. It was simply a correction, delivered in public, precise, and final. The room went silent, the crackling hearth, the wind howling outside, the frantic beat of Iria's own heart. These were the only sounds. No one laughed, no one argued. Rorik, his face suddenly ashen, took a stumbling step back, the color draining from his face as the meaning of Dorian's quiet command settled deep into his bones. He knew, as everyone in the hall now knew, that he had trespassed. Nothing else was said. Nothing needed to be. Dorian Falk merely held Rorik's gaze for another stretched second, a silent warning passing between them, before his attention, unnervingly, slid back to Iria. His eyes, usually cool and assessing, held something she couldn't decipher, an intensity that felt like a brand. It wasn't pity, nor was it anger. It was something primal, something possessive, and it sent a shiver, not of cold, but of pure, unadulterated shock, through her entire being. From that moment on, The pack no longer treated Iria as background noise or a presence to be overlooked. The silence that followed Dorian's pronouncement was thicker than any fog, heavier than any stone. Heads turned, eyes once dismissive, now lingered with a new, unsettling curiosity. They watched how close they stood to her, how they spoke, where their eyes rested. Because the Alpha King hadn't defended her in anger. He had claimed her with authority, and everyone in the room understood the same thing at once. She wasn't just noticed, she was protected. The protection felt like a cage, or perhaps a spotlight. Both were terrifying. The feast continued, but for Iria, the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. Every whisper, every glance felt magnified. She could practically feel the collective consciousness of the pack shifting, redefining her place. The scent of fear, sharp and metallic, now mingled with the pine and roasted meat. Her own fear, and perhaps a hint of it from others. She wanted nothing more than to flee, to run into the safety of the dark forest and disappear, but her feet were rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the weight of Dorian's sudden, inexplicable attention. She risked another glance at him. He hadn't moved from his spot, a silent sentinel leaning against one of the great support beams, watching the hall, yet somehow she felt the subtle pull of his gaze. It was like a physical tether, invisible but undeniably there. He was immense, broader than any man, radiating an almost mythic power that both awed and intimidated. He was the unchallenged ruler, the Alpha King not just of the Serpent's Ridge Pack, but of a vast territory known for his harsh justice and unwavering loyalty to his own. Why would such a man, burdened by the weight of his destiny, even see her, an Omega, a wolfless, barren Omega? The question swirled in her mind, a dizzying maelstrom. Was this some form of pity? A public display of justice to remind his pack of his ultimate authority? Or was there something deeper, something she couldn't possibly comprehend? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She knew the stories of alphas and omegas, the fated mates, the undeniable pull, but that was for others. For the strong, for those with a wolf, not for her. She was empty. A few minutes later, Dorian straightened from the beam, his movements fluid and powerful, like a predator stretching before the hunt. He walked with a quiet grace that belied his size, parting the crowd without effort. No one dared to block his path. Their heads bowed, their eyes lowered in deference. And then he was walking towards her. Iria felt a cold dread creep up her spine. Her palms grew slick, her breath shallow. Every step he took resonated through the floorboards, through her very bones. The scent of him, primal and masculine, a mix of ancient forest, rich earth, and something uniquely his own, something powerful and utterly intoxicating, filled her senses, overwhelming the smells of the feast. It was a scent that spoke of deep roots, of unwavering strength, and a loneliness that only an Alpha King could bear. He stopped directly in front of her. His height was immense, casting her in shadow. She had to tilt her head back sharply to meet his gaze. His eyes, those moss-green depths, held hers captive. They were ancient, wise, and shockingly intense. She saw no pity there, only a profound, almost sorrowful recognition. Iria, he rumbled, his voice a low vibration that seemed to settle deep in her chest, awakening something dormant. He used her name, something few others ever bothered to do. It sounded different coming from him, imbued with a weight she couldn't quite place. She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up, constricted by a fear so profound it bordered on reverence. She merely nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. He studied her, his gaze sweeping over her face, her shoulders, her trembling hands. It wasn't an invasive stare, but a deep, searching appraisal, as if he were looking for something hidden. His lips, thin and firm, curved slightly, a ghost of a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You are more than invisible, Iria Wexford," he murmured, his voice softer now, almost a whisper that only she could hear, over the distant murmur of the still-stunned hall. His hand, large and calloused, lifted slowly, deliberately towards her face. Iria froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She expected a touch of comfort, perhaps a reassuring pat. What she received was something else entirely. His thumb, rough yet gentle, brushed just beneath her left eye, tracing the faint curve of her cheekbone. It was a touch that sent a jolt of raw electric energy through her, a sensation so potent it stole her breath. It was a touch of acknowledgement, a silent claim. Then his eyes, dark and unreadable, dropped to her neck, lingering there for a beat that stretched into an eternity. He didn't touch her, but the unspoken implication was clear. A silent vow whispered across the space between them. A shiver, not of fear, but of something far more potent and terrifying, coursed through her. His scent, now overwhelming, enveloped her, drawing her in, awakening a deep, primal yearning she hadn't known she possessed. "Your place here," he said, his voice a low growl now, dangerous and possessive, "is not for others to determine." His eyes met hers again, and in their depths, she saw a flicker of something ancient and undeniable, a recognition. A connection that defied logic, defied her very nature. Her omega status, her barrenness, her silence, none of it seemed to matter in the face of that look. It was a promise, a warning, and a declaration all at once. He paused, his thumb still resting lightly on her cheek, his gaze unwavering. The air around them thrummed with unspoken power. "Tomorrow," he finally said, his voice dropping to a near inaudible whisper, "we will speak." And then, with a final, lingering brush of his thumb, he lowered his hand and turned, melting back into the shadows and the deferential crowd, as silently as he had appeared, leaving Iria standing utterly alone, trembling, the echo of his touch burning on her skin like a brand, and the weight of his claims settling upon her, heavy and inescapable. What could an Alpha King possibly want with a forgotten Omega? The question screamed in her mind, a terrifying harbinger of a future she couldn't possibly imagine. The silence of the Great Hall, after Dorian's departure, was far heavier than any noise. It pressed in on Iria, a suffocating blanket woven from 1,000 curious, fearful, or resentful gazes. The residual warmth of his thumb on her cheek burned, an invisible brand that announced his claim to all, even if she herself couldn't fathom its meaning. Her heart, a frantic drum against her ribs, echoed the question screaming in her mind. Why? Why me? What does he want? The air, once thick with feast smells, now felt charged with a dangerous electric energy that hummed around her, a constant reminder of the impossible shift in her world. Every muscle in her body screamed for escape, for the familiar anonymity of the deep woods, but her feet felt cemented to the polished floorboards. She was a statue, frozen under the sudden, blinding spotlight of the Alpha King's attention. The transition from the oppressive weight of the Great Hall to the cool embrace of the moonlit forest was jarring, a desperate escape Iria barely registered. She fled, not walking, but practically running, her worn cloak flapping behind her like a tattered wing. The sense of pine and damp earth, usually a comfort, now felt like a shroud. The world outside the hall was no longer a refuge. It was a vast, echoing space where she felt Dorian's claim like a physical weight, drawing every shadow, every rustle of leaves into its unsettling orbit. She didn't consciously choose a direction, her feet simply taking her along the familiar, winding path towards her small, isolated cabin, a humble dwelling nestled deep within the less frequented parts of the Serpent's Ridge territory. The cabin was a single room, built of rough-hewn logs, barely more than a hovel. It smelled of dried herbs, old wood, and the lingering scent of her own solitude. Inside, the darkness was absolute, a blessed cloak against the staring eyes of the pack, real and imagined. She stumbled through the familiar space, her hands fumbling for the flint and tinder. A tiny flame sparked, catching the dry kindling, and soon a small, weak fire began to crackle in the hearth. The shadows danced around her, lengthening and shrinking with each flicker, mirroring the chaotic churn of her thoughts. She sank onto her cot, pulling her knees to her chest, her arms wrapping around herself, as if to hold her splintering world together. The memory of Dorian Falk, immense and imposing, filled her mind. His scent, that intoxicating mix of ancient forest and something intensely masculine, still clung to her clothes, to her skin, most vividly on her cheek where his thumb had brushed. She pressed her fingers to the spot, a phantom warmth blooming under her touch. It wasn't just the scent, though. It was the way his eyes had held hers, the profound, almost sorrowful recognition she'd seen there. It had been as if he'd looked beyond her wolfless shell, beyond the Omega brand, and seen something else entirely. Something she herself couldn't perceive. "You are more than invisible, Iria Wexford." His words, low and resonant, echoed in the quiet of her cabin, a melody of both validation and terror. For 24 years she had been invisible. She had embraced it, cultivated it, found a twisted sort of safety in it. Now the Alpha King, the most powerful man she knew, had stripped that invisibility away in a single quiet command. He hadn't just defended her, he had claimed her. A shudder ran through her. What did that mean for an Omega? A barren woman who couldn't contribute to the pack, couldn't bear children, couldn't even shift. An Alpha King's mate was a symbol of strength, of fertility, of a powerful wolf. She was none of those things. The thought of being chosen by him, of standing beside him, was not a dream, but a nightmare of impossible expectations and inevitable humiliation. She wasn't worthy, she wasn't whole. The moon, a great silver orb, peered through the small, uncurtained window, casting long, skeletal shadows across her floor. Its light, usually a gentle comfort, now felt like an omen, heavy with unspoken power. She should try to sleep, to escape this waking terror, but her mind refused to quiet. Every sound outside, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a lone wolf, seemed to carry the weight of her predicament. Suddenly, a knock, soft yet distinct, reverberating through the thin wood of her cabin door. Iria froze. Her breath caught in her throat. No one ever knocked on her door. Not at this hour. Not ever, really. Her heart hammered, a frantic thrum against her ribs. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the lingering shock. "Iria." The voice, low and unmistakable, sent a jolt through her. Dorian, he was here. She scrambled off the cot, her legs trembling. Hesitantly, she moved towards the door, her hand hovering over the latch. The scent of him, now much stronger, seeped through the cracks in the wood, earth, pine, and that potent, untamed masculinity that both terrified and inexplicably drew her. Slowly, her fingers shaking, she unbarred the door and pulled it open just enough to peer out. He stood on her small, dilapidated porch, a towering silhouette against the moonlit forest. He wore a dark, heavy cloak that seemed to swallow the moonlight, making him appear even larger, more formidable. His eyes, those moss-green depths, were luminous in the darkness, fixed intently on her. The air around him shimmered with an almost visible power, a silent hum that vibrated in her very bones. "You said, tomorrow," she managed to whisper, her voice a raw, scratchy sound she barely recognized as her own. The sheer audacity of him, to come to her cabin in the dead of night, to stand on her porch as if it were his right, was staggering. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, deepening the scar along his jaw. "Tomorrow has dawned, Iria. The moon is a witness to the new day." His voice was a low rumble, as rich and deep as the earth itself, pulling at something deep inside her. "May I come in?" It wasn't a question, not truly, it was a command, softened by politeness. Iria hesitated for only a fraction of a second, then stepped back, opening the door wider. He filled the small doorway, his presence overwhelming the tiny space, absorbing all the air, all the light. The cabin, once her sanctuary, now felt impossibly small, vulnerable. He stepped inside, his cloak rustling softly, bringing with him the crisp scent of the night forest, and that potent personal scent of him that made her senses reel. He looked around, his gaze sweeping over the meager furnishings, the small hearth, the cot. His expression remained unreadable, but Iria felt a flush of shame rise up her neck. Her home was so plain, so poor. He turned back to her, his eyes locking onto hers, unwavering. "You are troubled." It was a statement, not a question. I don't understand," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why? Why did you do that? Why me?" Her gaze dropped to her hands, twisting nervously in front of her. "I'm an Omega, wolfless, barren." The words were an old wound, tearing open again. Dorian took a step closer, his presence expanding, encompassing her. "The pack's assessment of you is not my own." His voice was gentle, yet firm, stripping away the weight of those labels she had carried for so long. And you are not wolfless, Iria, merely quieted. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. What do you mean? No one had ever said such a thing. Her wolf was a ghost, a myth. He reached out, his large hand brushing a strand of her dark hair away from her face. His touch surprisingly tender. The sudden intimacy, the warmth of his skin against hers, sent another jolt of raw energy through her, making her tremble. There is a power in you, Iria. A resonance I felt the moment I first saw you years ago, though I did not understand it then. His gaze deepened, becoming almost hypnotic. A power that calls to something deep within me. You carry the scent of ancient earth, of life waiting to bloom, not barrenness. His words were impossible, a fantastical dream she couldn't possibly believe. Yet the way he said them, with such conviction, such unwavering certainty, made a tiny, fragile seed of hope begin to stir within her, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, the question torn from her. "I have nothing to offer an alpha king." Dorian's thumb stroked her cheekbone once more, lingering, sending shivers through her. His eyes, usually so guarded, held a flicker of something ancient and knowing, a deep sadness mingled with fierce determination. "I want you to understand your truth, Iria, and to stand by my side. There are shadows stirring in our lands, an ancient threat returning. I have felt it, a chill in the spirit of the forest, a whisper on the wind. My wolf cries out for something vital, something missing. And tonight, when I defended you, when I truly saw you, my wolf recognized it." His gaze dropped again, not to her neck this time, but to her left wrist, where a faint crescent-shaped birthmark usually lay hidden beneath the cuff of her sleeve. His fingers, warm and strong, gently took her hand, pushing back the fabric. As his thumb brushed over the pale mark, a strange sensation bloomed under her skin. It wasn't pain, but a deep, vibrant hum, like a forgotten chord struck back to life. The mark itself seemed to darken, to glow with a faint internal luminescence that Iria had never, ever witnessed before. Dorian's breath hitched. His eyes, wide with surprise and a fierce joy she hadn't expected, met hers. "The mark of Lyra," he whispered, his voice thick with awe. "It sleeps no more." Iria stared, mesmerized and terrified, at her glowing wrist. The crescent, once a mundane birthmark, now pulsed with a soft silver light, mirroring the moon outside. Lyra, what was Lyra? Her head spun, reeling from the impossibility of it all. Dorian's fingers tightened on her wrist, his grip possessive, unyielding. "Iria," he said, his voice now a low growl, laced with a primal urgency, "you are not merely protected, you are destined. And now the true battle begins." He pulled her closer, his gaze burning into hers, the scent of him utterly enveloping her. "Our fates are entwined, Omega, whether you believe it or not." The silver light pulsed from Iria's wrist, a soft ethereal beat against the cavernous darkness of her cabin. It was impossible, a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and the overwhelming presence of the Alpha King. Yet the warmth of Dorian's fingers on her skin, the undeniable thrumming beneath her birthmark, and the fierce, almost desperate joy in his moss-green eyes were terrifyingly real. Her world, already upended by his public claim, now spun on a new, dizzying axis. The scent of him, primal and insistent, filled her lungs, pressing against her very soul, demanding an acceptance she wasn't ready to give. Iria stared at her wrist, at the crescent mark that had always been a faint, innocuous smudge on her skin, now glowing with a soft internal luminescence. It pulsed, a quiet heartbeat under Dorian's thumb, and with each beat, a foreign warmth spread through her veins, chasing away the cold dread that had been her constant companion. Lyra, the mark of Lyra. The words echoed in her mind, carrying an ancient weight, a forgotten melody. What is this?" Her voice was a fragile whisper, barely audible above the sudden, frantic pounding of her own heart. She tried to pull her hand away, a reflex born of fear and disbelief, but Dorian's grip was firm, unyielding, though not unkind. He released her hand slowly, reverently, his gaze still fixed on the faintly glowing mark. "It is the mark of a lineage thought lost, Iria," he rumbled, his voice a low, gravelly sound, filled with a mixture of awe and solemnity. "The mark of Lyra signifies a rare, potent connection to the primal magic of the moon, a guardian spirit, and a hidden strength that sleeps within its bearer. It is said that only those born under the deepest shadow, yet destined for the brightest light, carry it." Iria shook her head, her dark hair falling across her face. "But I'm an Omega, wolfless, barren. There is no magic in me, no hidden strength." "My wolf is silent, if it ever existed at all." The old labels were a shield, a comfort in their familiarity, even as his words chipped away at them. She looked into his eyes, searching for a trick, a cruel jest, but found only unwavering conviction. Dorian stepped closer, his imposing form eclipsing the faint moonlight from the window. The cabin, already small, seemed to shrink further around them, holding them in an intimate, almost suffocating embrace. His scent intensified, wrapping around her, a potent mix of ancient forest, damp earth, and something uniquely his own, a deep, resonant power that spoke of vast territories and untamed wilderness. It was both terrifying and alluring, stirring something deep within her that she didn't dare name. "Your wolf is not silent, Iria," he corrected, his voice a low, steady current that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly in her chest. "It is dormant, suppressed. The mark of Lyra is tied to its awakening. It is why you felt so incomplete. Your full power has been held captive, waiting for this moment." He reached out again, his large hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing over the still warm skin where he had touched her before. The touch was exquisitely gentle, yet it held an undeniable authority, a silent command for her to believe him. "And you are not barren. The Lyra line is known for its deep connection to life itself, to growth and renewal. That too has been suppressed." His words struck her with the force of a physical blow. Not barren, not wolfless, the very foundations of her identity, built on years of shame and rejection, crumbled around her. It was too much to comprehend, too fantastical to accept. Her mind reeled, grasping for familiar ground. "You speak of legends," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Old wives' tales. This is impossible. Why now? Why me? And what does any of this have to do with an ancient threat?" Dorian's gaze hardened, a flicker of grim determination replacing the previous awe. He withdrew his hand from her cheek, but his eyes never left hers. "The legends are real, Iria, and the threat is very real. For generations, the Lyra line has protected the balance between our world and the shadowy realms that border it. They are keepers of ancient knowledge, wielders of a unique magic that can seal breaches, mend tears in the fabric of existence. But the line was believed to be broken, lost to time after the last Lyra vanished centuries ago." He paused, running a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of vulnerability from the stoic Alpha King. "For the past few months, I have felt the whispers on the wind, the growing unease in the ancient stones of our territory. The forest itself groans under a new, suffocating weight. My wolf has been restless, a constant ache in my soul, sensing an encroaching darkness, a malevolence seeking to breach our world. I did not know what it was, only that it required a specific, rare power to repel it." He stepped back, gesturing vaguely around the small cabin. "Then tonight, when Rorik spoke to you, something ignited within me. A primal rage, yes, but also a profound recognition. My wolf howled for you, Iria, not just for a mate, but for the answer to the encroaching darkness. It recognized the dormant Lyra within you. It recognized its guardian." Iria's head swam. Guardian, destiny, ancient threat. It sounded like something ripped from a child's fable, not the harsh reality of her life. Yet the intensity of his gaze, the raw conviction in his voice, made it difficult to dismiss. A terrifying thought bloomed. Was he mad or was she? "I can't," she managed, shaking her head again, tears pricking at her eyes. "I'm not strong. I've spent my life hiding, being invisible. I have no wolf, no magic. I'm just Iria." The plea was desperate, a yearning for her old, safe insignificance. Dorian's eyes softened, a deep, unsettling tenderness entering their depths. He reached for her again, this time taking both her hands, his thumbs gently stroking the backs of her knuckles. And just Iria is precisely who we need. Strength is not always in the loudest roar, Omega. Sometimes it is in the quiet resilience, the hidden depths, the unwavering spirit that has endured decades of dismissal and still rises. Your strength is in your refusal to break, even when the world tried to shatter you. His words, spoken with such unwavering belief, were a balm and a brand. They ignited a spark within her, a tiny flicker of warmth that pushed back against the encroaching fear. It was the first time anyone had ever truly seen her suffering, and acknowledged her resilience, rather than her supposed flaws. The simple act of his hands holding hers, his steady gaze, created a bubble of intimacy, a fragile connection in the midst of impossible revelations. You don't have to carry this burden alone, he continued, his voice dropping to a seductive murmur that vibrated through her, pulling at a primal chord she hadn't known she possessed. I will be with you, my pack will be with you, and my wolf will protect you. He leaned closer, his warm breath ghosting over her lips, his scent now intoxicating, overwhelming. We are bound, Iria, by fate, by the moon, and by the ancient threat that seeks to tear our world asunder. His lips were inches from hers, the promise of a kiss hanging heavy in the air, electric and terrifying. Her heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs, echoing the wild rhythm of his own. She felt a pull, a desperate yearning to lean into him, to taste the promise on his lips, to surrender to the impossible comfort he offered. It was a desire so potent it stole her breath, awakening a sensation she had never known. But then, a cold dread snaked through her, chilling the sudden heat. Surrender to what? A destiny she didn't understand, a power she didn't possess, a mate she barely knew? The pack, the whispers, the sudden, terrifying shift in her reality. Could she truly trust this? Just as his lips were about to meet hers, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ground beneath their feet. It was a subtle vibration, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself, carrying with it a faint, acrid scent, like ozone and burnt leaves, a smell that spoke of something ancient and corrupted. Dorian stiffened, his eyes snapping open, their green depths now alight with a fierce, predatory alertness. The tenderness vanished, replaced by the hardened resolve of an alpha king facing an imminent threat. His head tilted, his senses straining against the subtle disturbance. The air in the cabin grew heavy, charged with a sudden, oppressive energy. The glowing mark on Iria's wrist pulsed once, then twice, much brighter now, almost painfully so, before dimming abruptly, leaving behind only a faint phantom warmth. It begins, Kipkupant, Dorian growled, his voice low and dangerous, his gaze sweeping over Iria with a renewed intensity. The encroaching darkness, it feels your awakening, Lyra. He grasped her shoulders, his grip tight, almost bruising. You are no longer safe in the shadows, Iria. The power within you will draw it out. From this moment on, you are a beacon, and the hunt has truly begun. The ground trembled, not with an earthquake's brute force, but with a subtle, insidious vibration that spoke of something ancient and malevolent stirring beneath the earth. The acrid scent of ozone and burnt leaves, a smell that had no place in the heart of the forest, clung to the air, making Iria's throat clench. Dorian's words, it begins. The encroaching darkness. It feels your awakening, Lyra, echoed with the force of a death knell, shattering any lingering doubts about the reality of her predicament. Her wrist, where the mark of Lyra had just pulsed with blinding light, now throbbed with a residual phantom heat, a constant reminder of the impossible, terrifying truth. Her sanctuary was gone, replaced by a battlefield she never asked for. The silence in Iria's cabin after Dorian's declaration was shattered by the frantic pounding of her own heart. The air, once thick with the scent of pine and rich earth, now carried a faint, unsettling tang of something metallic and burnt, a foul premonition of the encroaching darkness Dorian spoke of. He still held her shoulders, his grip tight, almost bruising, his eyes, once tender, now alight with a fierce, almost desperate urgency. She felt like a deer caught in a hunter's snare, suddenly thrust into a role she neither understood nor desired. Her wolflessness, her barrenness, these had been her shields, her excuses for a quiet, unnoticed life. Now they were meaningless. "What do you mean, it feels my awakening?" Iria finally managed, her voice thin and reedy, completely lost in the face of his powerful intensity. How could this mark cause such a thing?" She gestured wildly at her wrist, where the crescent mark had dimmed to its usual pale state, though the phantom warmth beneath it stubbornly remained. Dorian released her shoulders, but his gaze remained fixed on her, unwavering. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare sign of agitation. "The Lyra line isn't merely a bloodline, Iria. It's a nexus, a conduit between our world and the primal energies that flow beneath it. When a Lyra is awakened, truly awakened, not just born with the mark, it sends a ripple through those energies. And if there is something else stirring, something malevolent, it will feel that ripple. It will seek to extinguish it." He walked to her small, uncurtained window, peering out into the moonlit forest, his broad back to her, yet his presence still filled the small room. "The shadow blight, that is what the elders called it, though few believed it was anything more than myth." His voice was low, grave. "An ancient entity, a parasite of life and spirit that feeds on despair and corruption, growing stronger when the veil between realms thins. It manifests as a creeping rot, tainting the earth, sickening the animals, and stealing the very will from our shifters. It has tried to breach our world before, centuries ago, and the last Lyra, before she vanished, was believed to have sealed it away." Iria sank onto her cot, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. The weight of his words, of this ancient history and impossible responsibility, threatened to crush her. "But I have no power. I'm empty." The mantra was automatic, a desperate plea for him to see her as she saw herself. Dorian turned, his eyes piercing through the shadows. "You are not empty, Iria. You are a vessel, a dormant spring waiting for the thaw. Your wolf, your true self, has been suppressed by generations of fear, by the pack's ignorance of what you truly are. Your lack of a shift, your perceived barrenness, these are symptoms, not definitions. The blight would have sensed the potential, the dormant power, and perhaps it even contributed to its suppression, to keep you from ever fully blooming." He took a step towards her, his voice softening, yet holding an undeniable edge of command. "But that changes now. Tonight, with your mark's flicker, you announced yourself. You are no longer safe to hide." The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her cherished anonymity, her quiet existence, was irrevocably gone, not just because of Dorian's public claim, but because she was now, unknowingly, a target. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through her. "What do I do?" she whispered, her hands clenching into fists in her lap. "I don't know how to fight. I don't know how to be this Lyra you speak of." Dorian knelt before her, his large frame somehow intimate, yet still radiating authority. The scent of him, that intoxicating mix of earth and untamed power, enveloped her, a strange anchor in the storm of her fear. "You don't fight alone. You will come to the Alpha's den. You will be safe there, and we will begin to understand what lies within you. My wolf recognized you, Iria. It has chosen you, not just as a mate, but as the key to our survival. My purpose, from this moment on, is to protect you, to awaken you, and to stand with you against this darkness." His hand reached out, not to her wrist this time, but to her face, his thumb gently tracing the line of her jaw. His eyes, in the dim light, were fathomless, filled with a primal protectiveness that bordered on fierce possessiveness. "The pack will have questions, Iria. They will whisper, they will fear, but they will also obey. And I will ensure they understand your value." The thought of living in the Alpha's den, in the heart of the pack, under Dorian's constant, scrutinizing gaze, was terrifying. She had always been an outcast, an invisible shadow. Now she would be under a magnifying glass, a symbol, a queen she was utterly unprepared to be. But the raw conviction in his voice, the unshakable belief in her, chipped away at her ingrained self-doubt, and beneath the fear, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth began to stir, a tiny spark of something akin to hope. "The Alpha's den?" she repeated, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. It was a place of power, of tradition, a place she had only seen from a distance. "It is where you belong," Dorian stated, his thumb stroking her cheek, sending a shiver of warmth through her. "By my side, for your safety and for the safety of all." He stood then, his movements fluid and powerful, and extended a hand to her. "Come." Dawn approaches, and with it, a new era for Serpent's Ridge. Iria hesitated for only a moment, then placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and utterly reassuring. As he pulled her to her feet, she felt an undeniable current pass between them, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible bond that had been forged in the crucible of fear and ancient prophecy. Leaving the cabin felt like stepping into an entirely new world. The crisp, cold air of pre-dawn bit at her exposed skin, but Dorian's proximity, his scent now enveloping her, offered a strange, comforting warmth. The forest was waking up, the birds beginning their tentative calls, but beneath the familiar sounds, Iria could almost detect a subtle discord, a faint, mournful hum that hinted at the encroaching blight. As they walked, Dorian kept a hand at the small of her back, a constant, grounding presence. He spoke little, but his silence was not distant. It was watchful, protective. He seemed to be listening, not with his ears, but with every fiber of his being, attuned to the subtle changes in the world around them. The pack house loomed into view as the first slivers of pale light touched the eastern sky. It was a sprawling complex of timber and stone, much grander than her humble cabin, already stirring with the muted sounds of early morning. Shifters moved about, preparing for the day, their forms indistinct in the fading twilight. As they approached, a few heads turned. Whispers started, hushed and quick, like rustling leaves. Iria felt their gazes, sharp and assessing, land on her and then on Dorian's possessive hand at her back. Resentment, curiosity, fear. She could read it all in their averted eyes, their stiff postures. Among them, Iria spotted Rorik, the beta who had insulted her at the feast. He stood near the entrance, speaking to another shifter, but his eyes darted to them, wide with a mix of defiance and unease. When Dorian's gaze, cold and unwavering, met his, Rorik visibly flinched, his face paling. He quickly dropped his head, turning away. The pack had understood the Alpha King's claim, and they would remember it. Dorian led her directly to the main entrance of the pack house, a heavy oak door that swung open silently as they approached. Inside, the central hall was cavernous, still largely empty save for a few early risers. The air was warmer here, scented with hearth smoke and old leather, but it still felt alien to Iria. He guided her up a grand staircase, its steps worn smooth by generations of feet, to the upper levels where the Alpha's private quarters were situated. He opened a door to a spacious room, far larger and more luxurious than anything Iria had ever known. A large four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped with heavy furs. A roaring fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting a warm, inviting glow. A thick, woven rug softened the floor, and a large window overlooked the sprawling Serpent's Ridge territory. "This will be your room," Dorian said, his voice surprisingly gentle as he gestured around the space. "It connects to my own. No one will bother you here. You are safe." Iria stood in the middle of the room, overwhelmed. It was beautiful, opulent, and utterly foreign. It was also a gilded cage, she realized, a place where she would be constantly under his protection, constantly observed. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Dorian stepped closer, his gaze sweeping over her, his eyes softening slightly. "Rest, Iria. We have much to discuss, much to learn, but for now, you are safe." He paused, then reached out, his hand gently touching her hair, his fingers lingering for a moment before dropping away. "I will send for fresh clothes and food, anything you need." He turned to leave, but at the threshold he stopped, his hand on the doorframe. He looked back at her, his expression unreadable, a conflict of stern alpha and something deeper, more vulnerable, flickering in his eyes. "The dreams," he murmured, his voice low, almost a personal confession. "Have you had them, Iria? Of the shadow, the cold, the whispers in the deep earth?" Iria froze. She had. For years she had dismissed them as mere nightmares, fragments of her own inadequacy, dreams of a creeping darkness, a suffocating cold that seeped into her bones, and faint, insidious whispers that promised oblivion. She had never spoken of them to anyone. She nodded slowly, her throat tight with a sudden, fresh wave of terror. "Yes," she whispered. "Always, since I was a child." A muscle twitched in Dorian's jaw. His eyes narrowed, a grim understanding settling over his features. "Then it has been seeking you longer than we knew," he said, his voice hard, almost a growl. "Longer than you have been awake. The shadow blight has been waiting, and now it knows where to find you." He stepped out, closing the door behind him with a soft click, leaving Iria alone in the luxurious room, the warmth of the fire doing little to chase away the sudden, bone-deep chill that had settled over her. The dreams. They weren't just nightmares. They were a connection, a beacon, and the shadow blight was coming for her. The luxurious furs of the bed, soft as spun moonbeams, felt alien against Iria's skin, a stark contrast to the coarse blankets of her old cot. The scent of hearth smoke mingled with a faint, lingering trace of Dorian's primal essence, a powerful mix of pine and damp earth that seemed to permeate the very stones of the Alpha's private quarters. Outside, the first tentative light of dawn painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and pale rose, but the beauty was lost on Iria. Her mind was a maelstrom of fear and disbelief, reeling from Dorian's parting words. "The shadow blight has been waiting, and now it knows where to find you." Her dreams, those insidious whispers, and the suffocating cold she dismissed as mere nightmares, were now terrifying harbingers. She was no longer just an Omega. She was a beacon, a target, and the gilded cage of her new room felt less like sanctuary and more like a trap. Hours passed in a blur of disquiet. Iria sat on the edge of the plush bed, her old tunic feeling out of place amidst the opulence. The fresh clothes Dorian had promised arrived quickly, delivered by a solemn-faced beta she didn't recognize. A soft woven dress of forest green, surprisingly warm and comfortable, and sturdy leather boots. They fit perfectly, as if made for her, adding another layer to the unnerving sense of destiny unfolding around her. The food, warm bread, rich stew, sweet berries, remained untouched. Her stomach churned with a nauseous mix of fear and an unfamiliar, burgeoning energy that buzzed beneath her skin. She kept touching her left wrist, pressing against the place where the mark of Lyra had glowed. It was still dormant, a pale crescent, but the phantom warmth persisted, a constant low thrum that was both unsettling and strangely grounding. Not barren, not wolfless, a vessel, a dormant spring. Dorian's words repeated in her mind, a new bewildering narrative challenging the one she had lived for 24 years. Could it be true? Could she, Iria Wexford, the forgotten Omega, truly harbor such a secret, such a power? The thought was terrifying, not exhilarating. Power meant responsibility, meant exposure, meant a world she had no tools to navigate. The heavy oak door to her room opened, startling her. Dorian stood there, silhouetted against the brighter light of the hall. He had changed into a simpler tunic and trousers, but the raw power he exuded remained undiminished. His eyes, those moss-green depths, swept over her, taking in her untouched food, her tense posture, the way her fingers still hovered over her wrist. "You haven't eaten," he stated, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the quiet room. It wasn't an accusation, but an observation laced with concern. He closed the door behind him and moved further into the room, his stride silent and powerful. Iria shook her head, unable to find her voice. Her throat felt tight. He sat on the edge of the bed opposite her, the heavy mattress dipping under his weight. His proximity, the rich, earthy scent of him, filled the air, making her senses reel. It was a scent that spoke of ancient trees, of raw earth, and the untamed wilderness of his own wolf. A scent that both intimidated and inexplicably, dangerously, drew her in. "The fear is a natural response, Iria," he said, his voice softer now, almost a caress. "But it will not serve you. The shadow blight feeds on it." He reached out, his hand covering hers, gently prying her fingers from her wrist. "You must learn to trust what stirs within you, and to trust me." His touch sent a familiar jolt through her, a wave of electric energy that made her breath catch. She looked into his eyes, searching, She saw no deception, only a fierce, unwavering resolve, and something else, a profound loneliness that resonated with her own. "How can I trust a power I don't understand?" she whispered, the words finally breaking free. "A wolf I can't feel? A destiny I never asked for?" Her voice cracked with the weight of her helplessness. "I'm not like you, Dorian. I'm not strong. I'm nothing." Dorian's thumb stroked the back of her hand, a small, comforting gesture that belied the power of his person. "You are more than you know, Iria. And your wolf, though quiet, is there. I feel it, a gentle spirit, but deeply rooted, fiercely protective. It has simply been waiting. For the right moment, for the right call." His gaze dropped to their joined hands, then back to her eyes. "And for the loneliness, I understand that better than most. The burden of leadership, of an alpha king, is a solitary one. Until now." His confession, so quiet, so unexpectedly vulnerable, pierced through her fear. He, the formidable alpha king, confessed to loneliness. It was a bridge between them, a fragile thread woven in the dark. It made him seem less like a myth and more like a man, albeit a magnificent one. "Tell me more about the blight," she finally asked, her voice steadier. "And the Lyra, what did the last one do?" Dorian's expression grew serious again, the weight of his burden settling back onto his shoulders. "The shadow blight is not a creature of flesh and blood, Iria. It is a parasitic spirit, a malevolent force that seeks to consume life, to twist the very essence of existence into despair. It thrives in discord, in weakness. It preys on the vulnerable. Centuries ago, when it last threatened our lands, it manifested as a deep, consuming sickness. The forest withered, animals grew diseased and feral, and shifters fell into a profound melancholy, their wolves fading into shadows until they became mindless husks." He paused, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. The last Lyra, Eliana, was said to have sacrificed herself to seal the breach. She drew the blight back into the shadow realms, using her own life force, her own immense connection to the moon's magic, to weave a ward that held it back. The price was her life, and the knowledge of her lineage seemed to vanish with her, until you. Iria shuddered. Sacrifice. Her life force. The words hung heavy in the air. "I can't do that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't even know how to shift, let alone wield ancient magic." "You won't have to," Dorian said firmly, his eyes burning with conviction. "Not alone. That is what I am here for. I will find the ancient texts, the rituals that speak of the Lyra's power, of Eliana's sacrifice. We will learn together, and my wolf will be your anchor, your strength, until yours fully awakens." He leaned closer, his scent enveloping her, his eyes holding hers with an intense, possessive warmth. "You are not alone, Iria. Never again." A strange calm began to settle over her, a fragile peace born of his unwavering belief and his formidable presence. His words, his scent, the warmth of his hand, all conspired to create a bubble of safety, a fleeting respite from the terror. For the first time, she truly felt seen, truly felt protected, not as a duty, but as something precious. As if on cue, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the stone walls of the room. It was softer than the one they'd felt in her cabin, but it carried the same faint, acrid scent of ozone and something sickly sweet, like decay. Dorian's head snapped up, his senses instantly on high alert. His jaw tightened, and a low growl rumbled in his chest, a primal sound that sent a shiver down Iria's spine. "The blight grows bolder," he murmured, his gaze sweeping towards the window, where the morning light had fully chased away the shadows, but now seemed to carry a strange, muted quality, as if dulled by an unseen haze. "It feels you, Lyra. It knows you are here." He stood abruptly, pulling her gently to her feet. "Come, you will eat, and then we will go to the archives. It is time we face this." His hand remained clasped around hers, a lifeline. The walk to the dining hall was fraught with tension. The pack members, now fully awake, moved with a different kind of energy. Their whispers were louder, their gazes more direct. Fear mingled with resentment in their eyes as they saw Dorian holding Iria's hand, leading her, openly claiming her. She heard snippets, Omega? What does the king see in her? Barren. A curse. Dorian's presence was a shield, his wolf's growl, though silent, palpable in the air around them. He met every gaze, his eyes hard and challenging, daring anyone to speak ill. No one did. But the hostility was a cold weight, pressing in on Iria from all sides. Later, in the pack's ancient archives, a vast room filled with scrolls and leather-bound tomes, Dorian worked tirelessly, his brow furrowed in concentration. He pulled out dusty scrolls, his fingers tracing ancient script, mumbling in a language Iria didn't understand. She sat on a low stool, observing, occasionally catching a glimpse of cryptic drawings, a crescent moon, a shadowed entity, a woman with flowing hair, her hands glowing. As the day wore on, a deep weariness settled over her. The constant tension, the fear, the overwhelming flow of new, impossible information. She found her gaze drifting to Dorian, to the sheer force of will he exuded, his unwavering focus. He was magnificent, a king burdened by destiny, yet facing it head-on. A warmth, unfamiliar and potent, bloomed in her chest, a quiet admiration, a nascent bond, a primal draw that began to stir in the depths of her soul. Suddenly, a sharp cry from outside startled them both. It was a hunter's call, urgent and laced with fear. Dorian was instantly on his feet, his hand going to the hilt of the blade at his hip. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice sharp, authoritative. But Iria was already moving, compelled by a strange, insistent pull. She followed him out of the archives and into the main hall, where a small group of shifters had gathered around a young hunter, his face pale with terror. "My traps," the hunter gasped, his breath ragged. In the old hunting grounds, the deer, they were twisted, their eyes black, and the trees, king, their weeping shadow. A collective gasp went through off the hall. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable dread. The acrid scent, subtle before, now intensified, a putrid stench that made Iria's stomach churn. Dorian's eyes, dark and grim, met Iria's across the hall. The silent message was clear. "It's here." Just then, a shiver ran down Iria's spine. Not of cold, but of something else. A deep, resonant hum started in her chest, a low thrum that spread rapidly through her limbs, through every cell of her body. The mark of Lyra on her wrist began to glow, not faintly this time, but with a fierce silver light that pulsed with an undeniable power, mirroring the racing beat of her heart. It was accompanied by a rising sense of energy, a strange, profound connection to the very earth beneath her feet. And then she heard it, not with her ears but deep within her mind, a low, desperate moan, a howl. Not a human sound, but the deep, mournful cry of a wolf, trapped in suffering, echoing from the very heart of the forest. Her wolf. It was calling, and it was in pain. The sound tore through her, awakening something primal and fierce. Her eyes, wide and suddenly alight with an unnatural silver glow, met Dorian's. His face, etched with grim determination, registered a flicker of shock, then a profound, almost fearful understanding. The shadow blight was here, and her wolf, long dormant, was finally screaming. The deep, mournful howl that tore through Iria's mind was not just a sound. It was a raw, visceral ache, a primal scream of suffering that reverberated through her very bones. It was the sound of her own wolf, long thought dead, now stirring from its enforced slumber, wounded and desperate. The mark of Lyra on her wrist flared with an almost blinding silver light, burning against her skin, mirroring the fierce, unnatural glow that now erupted in her eyes. The familiar world of the Serpent's Ridge Hall, with its hearth smoke and pack murmurs, dissolved, replaced by a terrifying clarity of purpose. The shadow blight was here, and her wolf, her true self, was not just calling, it was screaming in pain, demanding to be heard, demanding to act. The air in the great hall, moments ago, heavy with the stench of decay and fear, now crackled with a new potent energy. All eyes were on Iria, not with disdain or curiosity, but with a sudden, palpable terror. Her silver-glowing eyes, her trembling form, the undeniable power radiating from her wrist. It was a spectacle of the uncanny. Dorian across the hall had frozen, his own eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fierce awe. His hand, still on the hilt of his blade, seemed to relax slightly, as if his warrior instinct momentarily yielded to a deeper, more primal recognition. "The blight," the hunter whispered again, his voice cracking, pointing a shaking finger towards Iria. It's tied to her." A wave of fear rippled through the gathered shifters. Whispers erupted, louder, more frantic than before. "She brings the curse. An Omega tainted. Exile her, before it consumes us all." Dorian's head snapped up, his gaze sweeping over the pack with a ferocity that silenced them instantly. A low, guttural growl, barely perceptible but undeniably present, rumbled in his chest, a clear warning. "Silence, Decathlons," he commanded, his voice a whip-crack that cut through the burgeoning panic. "No one speaks ill of her, not now, not ever." He moved, a blur of dark cloak and raw power, crossing the distance to Iria in a few swift strides. He reached her, his large hands settling firmly on her shoulders, his presence a solid, unyielding anchor in the maelstrom of her awakening. His touch was an electric current, grounding her, steadying the frantic beat of her heart. "Iria," he murmured, his voice low, intimate, meant only for her. His eyes, now a deep, intense moss green, met hers, reflecting the silver glow that still pulsed within them. "Your wolf is awake. It calls to you. What do you feel?" The howl, though no longer an audible sound, still resonated deep within her. It was a cry of profound distress, mingled with an ancient burning rage. "Pain," she choked out, her voice raspy, alien even to her own ears. "And a cold, a suffocating cold. It's in the forest, Dorian. It's hurting something." She clutched at his forearms, her grip surprisingly strong. "We have to go. We have to help." Dorian nodded, his jaw set, grim. "I know." He turned to the pack, his gaze hard. "Gather a patrol. 2 betas, 3 hunters, armed. We go to the old hunting grounds." His eyes flickered back to Iria. "And she comes with us." A collective murmur of protest rose, quickly stifled by his unwavering stare. No one dared challenge him again. The fear of the unknown, of the blight, warred with their ingrained loyalty to their alpha king. "I can't let you," one of the older betas, a grizzled warrior named Talos, stepped forward, his expression worried. "King, she is unprotected, untrained. It is too dangerous." Dorian's eyes narrowed, a silent warning passing between them. "She is the Lyra, Talos. Her connection is our only hope, and she is not unprotected. My wolf will shield her." His gaze, burning with an almost feral intensity, swept over the gathered shifters. "Prepare, now." Within minutes, a small, heavily armed patrol had gathered. Iria, still trembling, felt a strange dual sensation. Her human self was terrified, overwhelmed. But beneath it, her newly awakened wolf pulsed with a fierce, unwavering determination, a burning need to confront the source of the suffering. The silver glow in her eyes had receded, but the phantom warmth on her wrist remained, a constant reminder of the power stirring within. Dorian walked at her side, his hand never leaving the small of her back, a silent, powerful reassurance. The scent of him, ancient forest, raw earth, and the underlying steel of his alpha wolf, was a potent anchor, a primal comfort that settled the frantic beat of her heart, even as dread clawed at her throat. He had given her a simple, sturdy hunting knife, its hilt warm in her trembling hand. A meager weapon against an ancient evil, but its weight felt strangely reassuring. As they plunged deeper into the forest, the change was stark and immediate. The vibrant greens of the Serpent's Ridge territory gave way to a muted, sickly palette. Trees, once towering and full of life, now stood skeletal, their branches brittle, their leaves shriveled and blackened as if scorched by an invisible fire. The rich, earthy scent of the forest was replaced by the cloying, metallic tang of ozone and decay, a stench that grew stronger with every step. The birdsong, usually a constant symphony, had vanished, leaving behind an oppressive, unnatural silence, broken only by the crunch of their boots on dead leaves. "The shadow blight feeds on life, twists it," Dorian murmured, his voice grim, his hand tightening on Iria's back as they navigated a patch of gnarled, blackened roots. It draws the vitality from the earth, from the spirits of the living. Iria felt it, not just saw it. A pervasive cold that seeped into her bones, stealing not just warmth, but hope. It was the same suffocating cold from her dreams, amplified, made real. It pressed in on her, trying to snuff out the fragile spark of her wolf. But with it came a strange, empathetic pain, a deep sorrow for the dying forest, for the suffering she could sense emanating from the blighted earth. Her lyra mark throbbed, a rhythmic pulse against the cold. They found the hunting ground. It was a scene of utter devastation. Several deer lay dead, their bodies grotesquely twisted, their eyes empty black pits. The earth beneath them was cracked and barren, and the trees surrounding the clearing wept a viscous, black sap that looked like tears of shadow. The air here was thick, suffocating, a heavy blanket of despair that settled over them all. Even the hardened betas looked visibly shaken, their wolves whimpering beneath the surface. "This is its work," Talos whispered, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on the horrifying scene. "It's worse than the legends." The cold intensified, seeking to penetrate Iria's very core. Whispers, faint and insidious, began to echo in her mind, promising oblivion, telling her she was weak, useless, a burden. "You are an omega, you are nothing. Let it take you. Surrender." It was the voice of the blight, insidious and seductive. But something within her, something fierce and unyielding, recoiled. Her lyra mark flared, burning hot against her skin, pushing back against the encroaching despair. A low growl, barely audible, escaped her lips, a sound of defiance she didn't know she possessed. It was her wolf, still nascent, but fiercely protective of its human host. Dorian, sensing her struggle, pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her waist, drawing her against his solid side. His own scent, powerful and grounding, pushed back against the blight's oppressive aura. "Fight it, Iria," he commanded, his voice a low, fierce growl in her ear. "Do not let it in. Your strength is greater than its whispers." He turned to the patrol. "Shield your minds. Focus on your wolves. Do not give it purchase." Iria leaned into Dorian, his warmth a lifeline. The whispers intensified, trying to find cracks in her resolve, twisting her old insecurities into new, potent barbs. But Dorian's presence, the steady beat of his heart against her back, the protective strength of his arm, became her anchor. She focused on his scent, on his unwavering belief in her. "He sees me. He believes in me." The thought was a tiny ember, glowing against the encroaching cold. Suddenly, the black sap weeping from the trees began to coalesce, forming shadowy tendrils that stretched and writhed, reaching towards Iria. The air grew impossibly heavy, crushing, like an invisible weight pressing down on her chest. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of despair, threatening to drown out all other thought. Dorian pushed her behind him, drawing his blade in one fluid motion, its polished steel catching the muted light. His stance was wide, protective, his wolf's growl now a palpable vibration in the air around them. "Stay behind me, Lyra," he roared, his voice filled with a primal rage that banished the whispers for a fleeting moment. The tendrils whipped forward, faster now, seeking her. Iria felt a surge of raw, untamed power erupt from her core, a burning heat that pushed back against the cold. The mark of Lyra on her wrist pulsed with a blinding silver light, and the hunting knife in her hand felt impossibly heavy, impossibly charged. Her human mind screamed in terror, but her wolf, now fully roused, surged forward, its instinct to protect, to fight, overwhelming all else. She didn't know what she was doing, but she lifted the knife, aiming it at the nearest shadow tendril. A bolt of pure silver energy shimmering like frozen moonlight shot from her hand, not from the knife itself, but through it, a conduit for the power that now surged through her. It struck the tendril, searing it, making it recoil with a soundless shriek that vibrated only in her mind. Dorian glanced back, his eyes wide with surprise, then a fierce, triumphant grin. "Yes, Iria, unleash it." The fight was no longer just his, it was hers too. She was no longer a bystander, but a weapon, a shield, a conduit for the ancient power stirring within her. The air thrummed with the clash of light and shadow, of burgeoning power and ancient malice. Just as another tendril lunged, faster and more aggressive. A familiar acrid scent, stronger than before, washed over them. A sickening wave that made her gag. And then, a sound. Not a roar, not a growl, but a chilling psychic groan that resonated deep within the blighted earth. A voice of ancient, malevolent hunger. Iria felt a searing pain rip through her mind. A sudden, blinding flash of images. A crumbling ancient stone. A dark, gaping maw in the earth. And a silhouette, indistinct yet terrifyingly familiar, standing before it, laughing. It was a vision, a direct assault from the heart of the blight itself. And then the image shifted, focusing on the silhouette's hand, a hand with a faint crescent-shaped mark, eerily similar to her own, but twisted, black, and radiating pure malice. The blight wasn't just here, it had a host. And that host, that other Lyra, was coming for her. The silver light from Iria's mark flared, then dimmed, her body suddenly racked with an agonizing cold. She crumpled, the vision fading to black, but the terrifying image of the twisted mark burned behind her eyelids. The last thing she heard before darkness consumed her was Dorian's furious roar, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage and fear. The world dissolved into a cacophony of fear and primal rage. Iria plummeted into a suffocating darkness, the last sensation a searing pain in her mind, a vision of a twisted crescent mark, and Dorian's guttural roar, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury and desperation. The cold, that insidious, soul-sucking cold of the shadow blight, enveloped her, promising oblivion, whispering her deepest fears into her unconscious mind. But even in the abyss, a flicker of silver light pulsed, a stubborn defiance, a furious, nascent wolf clawing its way to the surface, refusing to yield. Iria's fall was not into silence, but into a chaotic symphony of the blight's whispers and the distant, muffled sounds of battle. Her human body lay prone on the blighted earth, vulnerable, but her spirit was flung into a terrifying void, a realm of profound cold and insidious shadows. Here, the whispers were deafening, weaving through her memories, twisting every past humiliation, every moment of self-doubt, into potent, agonizing barbs. You are weak. You are barren. You are nothing. He will abandon you. Everyone always does. But this time, something fought back. Within the deepest recesses of that cold void, a silver light flared, small at first, then growing, pushing against the encroaching darkness. It was her wolf, fully awakened now, a magnificent, spectral creature of pure moonlight, its form shimmering, its eyes blazing with fierce, protective love. It was wounded. Yes, the blight's attack had reached it, but it was not broken. It was furious. "Fight, little one," a voice, not of words but of pure thought, resonated in Iria's mind. It was her wolf's voice, ancient and powerful, yet imbued with a profound tenderness that brought tears to her spiritual eyes. "Do not listen to the lies. You are strong. You are life. You are Lyra." The wolf pressed against her, a comforting warmth pushing against the cold. It showed her images, not just of Eliana, the last Lyra, but of generations of Lyra women, their hands glowing with silver light, weaving wards, mending the veil. It showed her the connection between the crescent mark and the moon, the deep, resonant power that flowed from the celestial body, through the Lyra, and into the earth. And it showed her the twisted mark, the source of her vision. "A corrupted Lyra," her wolf communicated, its voice laced with sorrow. "One who succumbed to the blight's promises of power, of vengeance for perceived slights. The blight cannot fully manifest in our world without a living vessel, a powerful conduit. It seeks to consume the life force of a Lyra, to twist their innate connection to the moon into a portal for its darkness. This other," she offered herself. The realization was a cold, hard stone in Iria's spiritual gut. The other Lyra wasn't just a victim, she was a willing host, a twisted mirror of Iria's own potential. The blight didn't just want to destroy, it wanted to corrupt and control. "Bye. Draw on the moon, Iria," her wolf urged, its spectral snout nudging her. "Feel its pull, feel its light. Let it fill you, let it purify the despair." Iria focused, pushing past the whispers, past the fear. She reached out, not with her physical hands, but with the very essence of her being, towards the distant, shimmering light of the full moon, a silver thread, impossibly thin, yet incredibly strong, connected her to it. She pulled, and a torrent of cool, cleansing energy surged through her, washing away the cold, silencing the whispers, filling her with a vibrant, pulsating power she had never known. Her Lyra mark, in the spiritual realm, blazed like a miniature sun. In the physical world, Dorian Falk was a whirlwind of primal fury. The moment Iria crumpled, a red haze had descended over his vision. The Blight's tendrils, emboldened by her fall, whipped and lashed, trying to reach her. But Dorian stood as an immovable bulwark, his alpha wolf fully unleashed. He snarled, a visceral, guttural sound that tore through the oppressive silence, his every movement a testament to untamed power and desperate protectiveness. His blades sang through the air, shearing through the shadowy tendrils, each strike imbued with the raw force of his rage. The patrol, though struggling against the Blight's mental assault, rallied around him, drawing strength from their alpha's ferocious defense. Talos, bloodied but unbowed, fought beside him, his own beta wolf snarling. But the enemy was insidious, relentless. The air grew thicker, heavier, the stench of decay overwhelming. Then, from the gnarled, weeping trees at the edge of the clearing, she emerged. She was a woman, cloaked in shadows that seemed to shift and writhe around her, making her form indistinct. Her face, when she stepped into a sliver of muted light, was one of twisted beauty, gaunt and sharp, her eyes glowing with an unnatural, malevolent light, like embers in a dying fire. On her left wrist, stark against her pale skin, was a crescent mark, identical in shape to Iria's, but it pulsed with a sickening obsidian glow, radiating cold and despair. "Dorian Falk!" Her voice slithered through the air, not with sound, but directly into their minds, a chilling whisper that echoed with ancient malice. The mighty Alpha King, defending a broken Omega. How pathetic. Her gaze, filled with contempt, raked over Iria's unconscious form, and the last feeble spark of Lyra, so easily snuffed out. Dorian's roar of defiance shook the very air. "You will not touch her, creature!" he thundered, his wolf surging, his eyes glowing with an infernal green light. He lunged, blade flashing, but she merely raised a hand. A wave of concentrated despair washed over him, hitting him with the force of a physical blow. Memories of past losses, of the burdens of his crown, of a loneliness that had gnawed at his soul flooded his mind, threatening to crush him. His stride faltered, his wolf whimpering, momentarily overwhelmed. The Blight's host laughed, a chilling, soundless sound that reverberated in their skulls. "Your strength is your weakness, Alpha," she whispered, stepping closer, her shadowed form seeming to grow, to siphon the life from the blighted trees around her. "Your love, your loyalty, they make you vulnerable. Your little Omega is already mine. Her power will be the final key to opening the way for the Blight to consume this pathetic world." She extended a hand, an obsidian tendril of shadow spiraling from her fingertips, aiming directly for Iria's chest. Just as the tendril was about to strike, a blinding flash of silver light erupted from Iria's body. She gasped, her eyes snapping open. But these were not Iria's usual soft brown eyes. They blazed with an intense, otherworldly silver, luminous and fierce, reflecting the full, majestic power of the moon. The mark of Lyra on her wrist was no longer faintly glowing. It burned with a pure, unwavering beacon, its light pushing back against the encroaching shadows. Iria sat up, her movements fluid and graceful, radiating an aura of ancient power. The heavy burden of fear and shame had vanished, replaced by a deep, resonant calm and an undeniable strength. Her human self was still there, terrified, but now utterly entwined with her wolf, with the ancient Lyra within her. She was complete. The obsidian tendril recoiled with a hiss of immaterial pain. The Blight's host staggered back, her twisted face contorted in a snarl of surprise and rage. "Impossible, you were broken." "I was dormant," Iria corrected, her voice clear and strong, resonating with a new authoritative power that made even Dorian momentarily pause. Her gaze, blazing silver, fixed on the host. "And I am broken no longer." She rose to her feet, the silver light from her body, pushing back the oppressive darkness, purifying the blighted air around her. Her hunting knife, still clutched in her hand, pulsed with a renewed, vibrant glow, no longer just steel, but a conduit for the moon's pure energy. "The blight will not consume this world," Iria declared, her voice ringing with conviction, her wolf's power fueling every word. "And you, corrupted Lyra, will not be its key," the host screamed, a soundless shriek of pure fury and frustration. "Fool, you know nothing of true power, of the gifts the blight offers. It promised me freedom from your kind, from the judgment, from the endless pain." "It offered you chains, cloaked in false power," Iria countered, taking a step forward, her silver light pushing against the host's oppressive darkness. "It feeds on your despair, as it fed on mine. But I chose light. I chose my wolf." The host lunged, a desperate, feral attack, shadowy claws extended. But Iria was ready. She met the attack, not with a physical blow, but with a surge of pure, concentrated moonlight energy from her open palm. It slammed into the host, making her shriek, forcing her back. The very ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble, the blighted earth groaning as the two opposing powers clashed. Dorian, shaking off the last vestiges of the blight's mental attack, moved to Iria's side, his own wolf roaring, his blade now glowing with a faint, internal light, mirroring Iria's power. He stood shoulder to shoulder with her, his presence a formidable force. "She is not alone," he growled, his eyes blazing, his hand finding hers, their fingers intertwining, a tangible bridge of power flowing between them. The host, eyes wide with a terrifying mix of desperation and malice, looked from Iria's glowing hand to Dorian's fierce resolve, then back to Iria, her gaze settling on the unwavering silver beacon of the Lyra mark. "You cannot stop it, true Lyra," she hissed, her voice filled with a terrible certainty. "The breach is already open, and it will have its tribute, if not your power, then your blood." With a final desperate surge of dark energy, the host plunged her shadowy claws not at Iria, but at the very earth beneath them, tearing a gaping maw in the blighted ground. From the newly opened chasm, a sickening, black mist billowed forth, coiling and writhing, carrying with it 1,000 silent screams and the overwhelming stench of raw despair. The true shadow blight, formless yet utterly terrifying, began to seep into their world, its chilling presence consuming all light, all hope. The host, eyes gleaming with dark triumph, turned back to Iria and Dorian, her form flickering as the blight's mist enveloped her. "Welcome to the true darkness, Alpha King," she whispered, her voice fading into the growing roar of the unleashed blight. "And farewell, Lyra, your light will be extinguished." The earth cracked and groaned, the darkness swelling, threatening to consume them all. Dorian's grip on Iria's hand tightened, his face grim, yet resolute. Their combined power, though formidable, now faced an enemy far greater than they had ever imagined. A tide of pure, ancient malevolence pouring into their world. This was not just a battle, it was a desperate stand against the abyss itself. The earth groaned, a ragged, dying cry as the shadow blight billowed forth from the gaping chasm. It was a formless horror, a sentient cold that sought to extinguish all life, all hope. Dorian's grip on Iria's hand was a lifeline, his presence a fortress against the encroaching abyss. Her own body, freshly awakened to its Lyra power, thrummed with raw energy, yet a profound weariness threatened to consume her. This was the true enemy, the ancient evil that had plagued their world for centuries, and its hunger was insatiable. But in the face of such overwhelming darkness, a fierce, unwavering resolve solidified in Iria's soul. She was no longer just an Omega, no longer just Iria. She was Lyra, and she would not let this world fall. The battle against the unleashed shadow blight was not one of tooth and claw, but of spirit and will. As the black mist spewed from the chasm, carrying with it 1,000 silent screams of despair, Iria felt her wolf surge, a magnificent silver beast within her, snarling defiance. Dorian, his alpha wolf fully unleashed, stood shoulder to shoulder with her, his blade a beacon of light, but his true strength came from his unwavering presence, his fierce, protective love acting as a shield against the blight's insidious mental attacks. "The seal," Iria gasped, her voice amplified by her Lyra power, resonating with a lunar echo. "It must be remade. I need the moon's full power." She raised her glowing hand, the mark of Lyra burning with an ethereal fire, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Her eyes, still blazing silver, met Dorian's. He understood instantly. He released her hand, but placed his large palms on her shoulders, his gaze locking with hers, pouring his strength, his belief, his very wolf into her. "Draw on me, Iria. Draw on the pack. We are your anchor. We are your strength." Around them, the patrol, led by a grim-faced Talos, formed a protective circle. Their wolves, though terrified, answered their alpha's silent command, focusing their collective will, their hope, into a tangible wave of energy that flowed towards Iria. The Blight's host, the corrupted Lyra, now almost fully subsumed by the black mist, shrieked, a soundless scream of pure rage as she realized Iria's intent. She lunged, a desperate, shadowy blur, but Dorian, with a guttural roar, intercepted her, his blade glowing, driving her back. Iria closed her eyes, focusing. She reached deep within, pulling on the silver thread that connected her to the moon, drawing on the immense power that flowed through her Lyra lineage. The cold of the Blight tried to penetrate, to snuff out her light, but her wolf snarled, a fierce guardian, shielding her spirit. She felt the ancient magic coalesce within her, a swirling vortex of pure lunar energy. Her body trembled, the sheer force of it almost too much, but Dorian's anchor, the unwavering flow of his support, kept her grounded. She opened her eyes, and a column of pure, shimmering moonlight erupted from her, piercing the roiling black mist, reaching for the heavens. It was a breathtaking, terrifying display of power. The blighted earth groaned, the air shrieked, and the black mist recoiled, screaming silently as the purifying light touched it. With a surge of will, Iria extended her hands, weaving the moonlight into intricate patterns, ancient Lyra symbols of protection and sealing, closing the gaping maw in the earth. The chasm pulsed, resisting, trying to consume her, but Iria's resolve was unyielding. The corrupted Lyra, caught in the outermost edges of the moon's searing light, let out a final agonizing shriek, a mix of despair and a fleeting moment of self-awareness. Her shadowy form flickered, twisted, and then dissolved into nothingness, consumed by the very darkness she had embraced. Her corrupted mark vanished, leaving only an echo of sorrow. With a final monumental push, Iria slammed her hands together, uttering a single, ancient word in a language that was not her own, yet resonated from the deepest part of her soul. Sealed. The column of moonlight crashed down, converging on the chasm, filling it with a blinding silver light. The earth shuddered, then slowly, agonizingly, began to knit itself back together. The black mist withered, dissipating into nothingness, leaving behind only the acrid scent of ozone and the heavy silence of aftermath. Iria swayed, utterly drained, her silver eyes dimming, the light on her wrist fading. Dorian caught her as she fell, pulling her tightly against his chest. Her head rested against his shoulder, listening to the frantic beat of his heart, now slowing, settling. His scent, that powerful mix of earth and pine, now felt like the very essence of home, of safety. She was exhausted, but alive, whole, and the powerful presence of her wolf, though quieted, was a comforting hum beneath her skin. The weeks that followed were a blur of healing, both for the land and for Iria. The Serpent's Ridge forest, slowly, miraculously, began to recover. The sickly trees shed their black leaves, new, vibrant green shoots emerging. The polluted air cleared, and the scent of pine and rich earth returned, stronger than before. The animals, once diseased and feral, now roamed freely, their spirits revitalized. Life bloomed anew, a testament to the Lyra's power and to the resilience of their world. Iria, too, was transformed. The wolfless Baron Omega was gone, replaced by a woman who walked with a newfound grace and inner strength. Her wolf was a constant, comforting presence, a deep well of intuition and calm within her. She still couldn't shift fully, not yet, but Dorian assured her it was a matter of time, of growth, of learning to fully integrate her human and Lyra selves. She felt connected to the earth, to the moon, in a way she never had before, a living conduit of primal magic. The pack's acceptance was absolute, almost overwhelming. The whispers had changed. No longer were they cruel and dismissive, but reverent, awestruck. They called her Luna, their queen, Their savior, Rorik, the beta who had first insulted her, sought her out, his face pale with remorse and shame. He knelt before her, begging for forgiveness, offering his fealty. Iria, guided by her wolf's quiet wisdom, simply placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes gentle. "Rise, Rorik. The blight feeds on bitterness. We rebuild with unity." His gratitude was profound, a silent vow to serve her with unwavering loyalty. Dorian was her shadow, her anchor, her unwavering partner. Their bond, forged in the crucible of battle and ancient prophecy, had deepened into an undeniable primal love. He treated her not just as his fated mate, but as his equal, his queen, his Lyra. He spent hours with her in the ancient archives, deciphering scrolls, learning about the Lyra lineage, understanding the profound responsibility they now shared. He showed her how to gently tap into her power, how to use it to heal the land, to soothe troubled spirits. His touch, once electric with unfamiliarity, was now a constant source of comfort and passion. His scent was her home. One crisp morning, weeks after the Blight's defeat, Iria stood on the balcony of her chambers, now truly their chambers, overlooking the thriving Serpent's Ridge territory. The sun warmed her face, and a soft breeze rustled through her hair. Dorian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. His chin rested on her head, and his familiar scent enveloped her, grounding her. "The lands heal," she murmured, leaning into his embrace, her fingers tracing the scar on his forearm. "The blight is truly gone." "For now," Dorian corrected softly, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "The Lyra's seal will hold for generations, but the threat of darkness is eternal. It will rise again, Iria, and you and our descendants will be ready." Descendants. The word hung in the air, a silent, hopeful promise. Her perceived barrenness, a source of such deep shame, had been a symptom of her suppressed Lyra energy. As her wolf awakened, as her power bloomed, so too did the dormant life within her. They had visited the pack healer, a wise old Omega woman named Maeve, who had confirmed it with a knowing smile. Iria was not barren. Her body, once considered broken, was now vibrant, fertile, ready to carry new life. She turned in his arms, her silver-flecked eyes meeting his moss-green ones. A joyous, triumphant smile bloomed on her face. "Our descendants, Dorian, not just Lyra, but Falk, a new lineage, forged in light and shadow." Dorian's eyes, usually so guarded, filled with a fierce, profound love that made her breath catch. He lowered his head, his lips brushing hers, a soft, tender kiss that spoke of promises, of forever. "Our children will carry both, my Lyra," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "The strength of the Alpha King, and the light of the Moon Guardian. They will be formidable." His gaze dropped, lingering for a moment on her flat stomach. A silent question, a shared hope. Iria smiled, a secret blooming in her heart. She wasn't ready to tell him yet, but she felt it, a faint, undeniable stirring deep within her. The new life, a child of both Lyra and Falk, born from the deepest shadows and forged in the brightest light. She had begun her journey as an invisible Omega, burdened by shame and silence. Now she stood as Luna, the Alpha Queen, the awakened Lyra, powerful and whole, cherished and loved, her wolf singing a joyous song within her. The moon shone bright above Serpent's Ridge, a silent witness to a new era, to a queen who was not just protected, but eternally claimed, her destiny entwined with the Alpha King, a bond as ancient and as potent as the forest itself. Her story was not one of ending, but of a glorious, triumphant beginning.